10 mightiest African empires of all time and their achievements. For centuries, African empires have been wrongly shrugged off as insignificant and backward societies, with hardly any contribution to the history of the world. It is only in the recent past century that close attention has been paid to the history and culture of Africa, exposing to the rest of the world just how impressive those African empires were. However, some of us already know of the more popular ones, the Egyptians because their architecture has stood the test of time, and the Zulus because of their famous victory against better equipped British imperial forces at Issa Douana. However, several other empires have risen and fallen in Africa and are often shrouded in mystery. That is why in this video, we will educate you more about these mightiest African empires. But first, if you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any of our videos. Number 1. The Mali Empire, 1275 to 1670 AD. After the fall of the Kingdom of Ghana, the Mali Empire rose to dominate West Africa, located on the Niger River to the west of Ghana in what is today Niger and Mali. The Mali Empire was founded by Mansa Sundiata Keita and became renowned for the wealth of its rulers, especially Mansa Musa. He was the grandson of Sundiata's half-brother and led Mali at a time of great prosperity, during which trade tripled. During his rule, Mansa Musa doubled the land area of Mali, and it became a larger kingdom than any in Europe at the time. The cities of Mali became important trading centers for all of West Africa, as well as famous centers of wealth, culture, and learning. Timbuktu, an important city in Mali, became one of the major cultural centers not only of Africa, but of the entire world. Vast libraries and Islamic universities were built. The Kingdom of Mali had a semi-democratic government with one of the world's oldest known constitutions, the Kurunkan Fuga. The Kurunkan Fuga of the Mali Empire was created after 1235 by an assembly of nobles to create a government for the newly established empire. The Gbara was the deliberative body of the Mali Empire and was made up of 32 members from around 29 clans. They were given a voice in the government and were a check against the emperor's power. It was presided over by a Belen Tigui, who recognized anyone who wanted to speak, including the Mansa. The Gbara and the Kurunkan Fuga remained in place for over 400 years until 1645. At its peak, the Mali Empire was the greatest and largest empire in West Africa, completely dominated by none other in the region in all affairs, in laws, language, and culture. It's been said that 50% of the world's gold supply as at the 1200s came from the Mali Empire. As a result of all those vast gold reserves, it comes as no surprise that one of its rulers, Mansa Musa, is generally considered the richest man to ever live. Mansa Musa's widely documented pilgrimage to Mecca between 1324 and 1325 famously destabilized the economy of most of northern Africa and parts of the Middle East because of the sheer volume of gold introduced into the economy. His massive spending and generous gifts so inflated the price of goods in the region and devalued gold and other precious metals that sparked a 10-year recession. Number 2. The Songhai Empire, 1464 to 1591 AD. After the collapse of the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire took over as the largest, most important state in West Africa during the 15th and 16th centuries. It was located in the middle areas of River Niger, in what is now central Mali, extending to the western Atlantic coast and towards the east into Niger and Nigeria. By the 13th century, its capital, Jio, which was established by the first king Suni Ali, had gradually become a thriving trading center. This made it a center of interest for the Mali Empire. By the end of the same century, the Malians conquered Jio and took over control of the trade until the 14th century, when the Mali Empire began to fall apart. The rulers of the Songhai Empire used that opportunity to reclaim control over several trans-Saharan trade routes. Soon, the Songhai Empire became one of the most powerful states in the history of Africa. Under the rule of Suni Ali, this empire grew in its influence as the power of the Mali Empire in the region, which began to decline. Conquering and then fortifying the key cities of Timbuktu and Jenne in 1468, Suni Ali's son, Soni Baro, was notoriously weak upon his succession to the Songhai throne, and within a year was usurped by Askia Muhammad I, or Askia the Great. Askia went about making sweeping political and economic reforms that consolidated the power of the empire and grew it to be the largest empire in Western Africa. Askia quickly legitimized his rule by allying himself to the scholars at Timbuktu, and thus became famous for encouraging scholarship and literacy within his realm. The Songhai were notable for their relatively advanced military tactics and structure. Armed with spears, arrows, iron breastplates, and copper shields, the Songhai infantry numbered 30,000 men, who were often flanked by a cavalry of 10,000 skilled horsemen. While Songhai Empire was once more the most powerful state in the world, it later crumbled in the late 1500s after a period of civil war and internal strife left it open to an invasion by the Sultan of Morocco. Number 3. The Kingdom of Kush, 1000 BC to 350 AD. This ancient Nubian empire ruled over a vast territory along the Nile River in what is modern-day Sudan, starting from around 785 BC. The Kingdom of Kush was so powerful that it even ruled its famous neighbor to the north, Egypt, as the 25th dynasty, which meant the monarchs of Kush were also the pharaohs of Egypt. The kingdom thrived for over 1,000 years and was at the very center of trade for iron and gold. Kushites also mummified their dead and built their own types of pyramids. In fact, the ancient Kushite capital of Meroe is home to ruins of over 200 pyramids, far more than Egypt. Comprised of the Nubian peoples, the Kushites had 3 great capitals over the span of their influential period in history: Kerma, Nepata, and most notably Meroe. Whilst they did develop many cultural similarities with the Egyptians, that came with the intermarriage of the royal families of both kingdoms, such as the veneration of Egyptian gods and the building of pyramids. They were distinguishable from the Egyptians in several key ways. For one, the Kushites were notably darker in complexion, dressed differently, and had their own language and Meroitic script. We also now know that the Nubians pioneered the use of early antibiotics and had established their own form of geometry, which was bolstered by a trigonometric method similar to that of the Egyptians. One of the coolest details about this civilization, which speaks to the advanced nature of its societal structure, is that the Kushites were famous for their female rulers. These queens, known as the Kandakes, featured prominently and often in Kush history. The first known Kandake was Shanak the Keto, who reigned in Meroe with full power and apparently without a king from roughly 170 to 160 BC. Another notable Kandake is Ameriranes, who ruled from about 40 BC to 10 BC and was known as the Great Queen for her leadership of the Kushite armies in a 5-year war against Rome from 27 BC to 23 BC. The Greek historian and geographer Strabo described her as very masculine and blind in one eye. Her tomb can still be seen at Jebel Bakar in Sudan. At the height of their power, the Kushites completely conquered Egypt, with King Pierre of Nepata establishing Egypt's 25th dynasty in 747 BC and becoming the first of a line of 5 black pharaohs that ruled Egypt until 656 BC. In addition to iron and gold, the Kingdom of Kush's economy relied on the trade of slaves, ivory, incest, and wild animal hides. From the iron, Nubian rulers equipped the empire soldiers with weapons that allowed them to dictate affairs in northeast Africa for centuries until its steady decline following Rome's conquest of Egypt. By the 4th century CE, the Nubian Empire had collapsed. Number 4. The Kingdom of Benin, 1180 to 1897 AD. The Kingdom of Benin was considered one of the most developed states as well as the oldest states in West Africa. Being established in the 11th century, it was located in what is now southern Nigeria. For the period that it existed, the rulers of Benin Empire, known as Oba, were extremely powerful and revered in an almost godlike manner. From its very famous capital city of Edo, the Benin Empire actively encouraged artisans to produce many artworks from iron, ivory, and bronze. The first king or Oba in Benin was a prince of Nigerian descent called Eweka, but the kingdom only reached its greatest power under the reign of Oba Eware the Great, who reigned from 1440 to 1473 AD. Ironically, the violent coup in which Eware became the king destroyed much of Benin City, but Eware's legacy is as a great builder. You might ask why. The answer is one of the single greatest feats of architecture and engineering that the world had ever seen up to that point is the Benin City walls. You must have heard about the Great Wall of China, No doubt, but according to estimates by new scientist Fred Pearce, Benin city walls were at 1.4 times longer than the Great Wall of China and consumed 100 times more material than the Great Pyramids of Cheops. The walls extended for 16,000 kilometers or 9,941 miles and are estimated to have required 150 million hours of digging to construct. In fact, Pearce describes them as perhaps the largest single archaeological phenomenon on the planet. Unfortunately, almost nothing of the walls still exists today. Following the Europeans' arrival to West Africa, the Benin rulers traded extensively with the Portuguese. In exchange for the firearms that were received from Portugal and Britain, the Benin Empire supplied Europe with palm oil, ivory, and pepper. Over time, the British Empire was able to have a stronghold over the Benin Empire and completely annexed it in the late 20th century. Number 5. The Kingdom of Ghana, 750 to 1076 AD. More commonly known as Ouagadougou, it was located in Western Africa, in modern-day Mauritania, Mali, and Senegal. This African kingdom was an important stop along the trans-Saharan trade route which connected African societies in the Sahel to the markets found along the coastlines of the Mediterranean Sea and the trans-Saharan gold trade. The kingdom had sophisticated methods of administration, often keeping written documentations of trades and stories of travelers to the region. They also had an intricate taxation system. The wealth of the kingdom grew immensely when its kings began building up stockpiles of gold nuggets that were in their possession, and with the introduction of camels, they were able to transport goods like gold, iron, copper, and ivory to places where they were needed. Soon their fame spread across Africa as well as Europe and eventually became famous to North Africans as the land of gold. At some point in time, its capital city, Kumbi Saleh, was said to be the largest city in the south of the Sahara Desert. At its peak, the empire had over 20,000 people who spoke languages like Soninke, Malinke, and Mande. The empire is said to have crumbled as a result of several events which include drought, civil war, and invasion by northern Almoravid Muslims from Morocco. Soon, the kingdom began to be attacked by King Soso, the ruler of Sumanguru. This eventually led to the emergence of the Mali Empire in 1235. Number 6. Carthage. Best known as ancient Rome's rival in the Punic Wars, Carthage was a North African commercial hub that flourished for over 500 years. The city-state began its life in the 8th or 9th century BC as a Phoenician settlement in what is now Tunisia, but it later grew into a sprawling seafaring empire that dominated trade in textiles, gold, silver, and copper. At its peak, its capital city boasted nearly 500,000 of inhabitants and included a protected harbor outfitted with docking bays for 220 ships. Carthage's influence eventually extended from North Africa to Spain and parts of the Mediterranean, but its thirst for expansion led to increased friction with the burgeoning Roman Republic. Beginning in 264 BC, the ancient superpowers clashed in the three bloody Punic Wars, the last of which ended in 146 BC. With the near total destruction of Carthage, today almost all the remains of the once mighty empire is a series of ruins in the city of Tunis. Number 7. The Ethiopian Empire, 1137 CE to 1975 CE. The Ethiopian Empire, also known as Abyssinia, covered a geographical area that the present-day northern half of Ethiopia covers. Stretching from the Middle Ages all the way to the Cold War, the Ethiopian Empire is the longest-lasting of the African kingdoms. It survived some of the most tumultuous events in modern-day history. It resisted various enemies attempting to encroach on its territory, from the Ottoman and Italian armies to the Egyptians. Legend tells us that its leaders are descendants of King Solomon. During the scramble for Africa, which saw European powers asserting colonial authority across African territories, Ethiopia successfully fought off and defeated Italy in the First Italo-Ethiopian War. Unfortunately, The empire's decline began when they lost the Second Italo-Ethiopian War in 1935. The monarchy was finally abolished in 1974 by a military junta. Number 8. The Aksumite Empire, 100 to 940 CE. This kingdom was also known as the Kingdom of Aksum or Aksum. The Kingdom of Aksum was a trading giant whose gold and ivory created a vital link between ancient Europe and the Far East. The kingdom spread across what is today Ethiopia and Eritrea in an area where evidence of farming dates back 10,000 years. It was one of the first empires in the world to adopt Christianity and was one of the four most powerful empires in the world at the time. The Kingdom of Aksum also developed its own written script known as Ge'ez, one of the first in Africa, and had its own unique architectural style. Ge'ez is currently used in the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia. Today, Aksum is also the rumored resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. The Aksumites were key players in the commercial trading routes which existed between the Romans and ancient India. They were considered one of the four great powers of their time alongside China, Rome, and Persia. Aksum controlled northern Ethiopia, Eritrea, northern Sudan, southern Egypt, Djibouti, western Yemen, and southern Saudi Arabia, totaling 1.25 million square kilometers, almost half the size of India. Aksum traded and projected its influence as far as China and India, where coins minted in Aksum were discovered in 1990. The Aksumites erected several stelae during their reign, but one of them is the famous of all. Standing at 79 feet, the obelisk of Aksum is approximately 1700 years old and is found in Ethiopia. Unfortunately, due to the rise of the Islamic Empire and bad climatic conditions, the power of the Aksumites began to decline around the 7th century CE. Number 9. The Mutapa Empire, 1430 to 1760 CE. The Mutapa Empire stretched between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers of southern Africa and encompassed parts of modern-day Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, and Angola. This state was comprised mostly of the Shona peoples, who are the ethnic ancestors of most modern-day Zimbabweans, and much of what we know about the empire, its geography, customs, and military practices come from their contact with the Portuguese. According to the oral tradition, the first Mwene or lord of the Mutapa Empire was a prince named Nyatimba Mutota from the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, who expanded the kingdom in a search of salt mines. In the years after this initial expansion, the original Mwene successors went on to establish arguably the most economically significant empire in southern Africa and its history. The region was also rich in gold, silver, and copper, which were expertly worked by smiths into all manner of jewelry and artifacts, many of which are still on display in Portuguese museums. According to 17th century Dutch writer Olfert Dapper, the Mutapa Palace was said to have 4 grand gateways, which led into the halls of the palace. The Kingdom of Mutapa exercised such power they acquired a subsidy from every captain who took office in Portuguese Mozambique, and they imposed a 50% tax levy on all trade goods imported. Sadly, the kingdom's decline began in the early 17th century due to factional infighting. This gave the Portuguese an opportunity to make Mutapa a vassal state. Number 10. The Great Zimbabwe, 1220 to 1450 CE. Also known as the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, the Great Zimbabwe started taking shape when people from the declining South African Kingdom of Mapungubwe moved into the southeastern hills of present-day Zimbabwe around the mid-11th century CE. About a century later, the Kingdom of Zimbabwe was founded, with the Great Zimbabwe serving as its capital and commercial hub. The rulers deployed the region's vast rich minerals into the transformation of the kingdom. The kingdom also benefited a lot from the numerous trading routes that connected the city to port cities on the Indian Ocean. According to the Zimbabwean historian David Norman Beach, the Great Zimbabwe could afford to put up magnificent boulders, stone towers, and massive defensive walls due to the wealth obtained from gold fields in the region. Buoyed on by those well-connected trading routes, the Great Zimbabwe is said to have prospered from the 13th century to the mid-16th century. At its peak, the capital city had about 20,000 inhabitants. This kingdom ruled over a large chunk of modern-day Botswana, Zimbabwe and Mozambique. It was particularly rich in cattle and precious metals and stood astride a trade route that connected the region to gold fields with ports on the Indian Ocean coast. It is difficult to point out what exactly caused the decline of this empire. Some of the possible reasons include a series of political instability and prolonged famine, which was triggered by the change in climate at the time. Some historians have also noted that the decline of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe could have been caused by the exhaustion of gold mines in the region, causing trading activities in the empire to move elsewhere. Another possible explanation for its decline was overpopulation, as more mouths had to survive on the kingdom's fast-shrinking resources. In any case, by the late 15th century, the Great Zimbabwe had been eclipsed by the Kingdom of Mutapa. The Great Zimbabwe is considered by many as one of the largest and most culturally important archaeological sites in Africa. Its ruins were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1986. Thanks for watching. We hope you are now educated about the fact that there's clearly much more to the glorious continent of Africa than meets the eye or makes it into the history books. What are some of the more obscure facts about African history that you know and might be interested to watch? Drop it in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and like, and also share it with your friends.